Some of the views expressed on the Mormon Channel are solely for the education and inspiration of our audience and may not represent the official position of the Church.
We believe in God, the Eternal Father.
We believe in the Bible
Son,
to be the Word of God.
We believe in being honest, true, chaste, benevolent, virtuous.
We believe that through the
good
atonement
to all
of
men.
Christ, all mankind
We
will
also
be saved
believe the
by
Book of Mormon to be the Word
Lord.
of God.
We may say that we follow the admonition of Paul. We believe all things. We hope all things. We have endured many things.
Welcome to Why I Believe. My name is Rick Starr. We're here in Mesa, Arizona for our show today, and our guest today is Heather Sandstrom. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you.
I'd like to introduce you a little bit. First of all, Heather is the granddaughter of President Ezra Taft Benson, and she has some wonderful stories to share with us about her experiences with her grandfather. Heather is also has had a career as a TV anchor woman in places like New York City, Boston, Canada, and Utah and Oregon. Heather, you wanted to be a mom, and so you set that career aside at one point in your life. Heather also has many achievements in her life, including Miss Teen Calgary, USA National College Queen, Miss Utah, Mrs. Oregon, and Arizona's Young Mother of the Year. One other thing that we'll touch on that I think will be very interesting in this program, Heather, today, is you're a cancer survivor.
Yes.
So
Twice.
You've had some really interesting experiences there, miraculous experiences that I'm excited for our listeners to hear about. So we welcome you, Heather, to
Thank you. It's
Why I
great to
Believe
be here.
today. Let's begin with getting to know you a little bit. You are Canadian.
Yes, I grew up in Calgary, Canada. My dad was a heart surgeon, and my mother was an opera singer.
Oh, really?
But she was the daughter of President Benson, the oldest daughter. There's 2 boys and 4 girls, and she was the oldest daughter. So actually, my grandma and grandpa Benson set them up on a date. She was the lead singer for the a cappella choir at BYU, and my dad was a surgeon in Canada, just a brand new surgeon. And my grandpa Walker was actually stake president in Canada for years. So Grandpa Benson had stayed at their home and knew they had a son that was a
So your
surgeon.
your mother is actually a U.S. citizen.
She's a U.S. citizen, so I'm dual citizen.
Oh, okay.
In the United States, they just recognize U.S. citizenship, so I vote here. But I was born and raised in Calgary. So Grandma and Grandpa set them up on a blind date. My mom was singing for the a cappella choir, and the 2 grandmas were in the back seat of the car, and they went on the house call.
Chaperoning.
So that did it. And that's how they met, and she moved to Canada, and so they got married in the Salt Lake Temples.
You grew up in Calgary.
Yes. And then I went to Brigham Young University and met my husband there at BYU. And I was a broadcast journalism major. I did news and reporting at KBYU for years, and then got a job in Oregon. And my husband and I, we got married 2 days after I graduated. And my grandpa Benson married us, so that was a neat
That's
experience.
great. That's great.
And then I got a job in Oregon doing the news on a TV station there, and my husband transferred from BYU to University of Oregon. And then he got accepted to dental school at several different schools, but he chose to go to Boston University because my dad had done surgery training in Boston. He said, go there. That's such a great place. So we lived in Boston for 4 years, and I was over the public affairs of the church in Boston.
Oh, wow.
While we lived there, and did a talk show just once a week so that I could be home with my little babies. So.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
You know, I know our listeners are going to want to know this. What is it like to be a granddaughter of a prophet?
Oh, it was a tremendous experience. I mean, to me, he was like a normal grandpa. They'd come to Canada quite a bit in the summer. He loved to go on boat rides, and at Christmas they'd come several times, and he'd go on. He loved bobsled rides with the horse-drawn carriage.
Oh, yeah.
Loved that because he grew up as a farmer in Idaho.
Yeah, and he was an outdoorsman.
He was.
A scouter.
He was a big scouter.
Yeah.
Big outdoorsman, big horseman. So he loved Canada, the outdoors. But then we'd go to conference every 6 months and stay in Utah, and we'd go to conference with them. But he was so funny when I was at BYU. he'd always call and say, do you want to go to the basketball game with me and Grandma at BYU and bring a date? Or do you want to go to one of the dances or the devotional? In fact, one time he was speaking at the devotional at BYU, and they asked, my news director at KBYU asked if I would get Grandpa to do an interview, to have me interview him. And I knew he was so busy and swamped. And he said, I would love to, but I don't know. I've got so many meetings. I'll see what I can arrange. He said, but for my granddaughter, I'll do it. So he arranged it and came down with all the security guys down to KBYU studios, and I got to interview him. And that was awesome. He was just tremendous. And he got me interested in politics and in defending marriage, defending families, and defending our country and our freedom. But anyway, he was so fun at BYU because he'd say, bring your date to the game. And I didn't want to tell my date, my Grandpa Benson is, inviting us. So I just said, do you want to go to the game? My grandparents have really good seats. They didn't know who he was. So we'd go to the game, and the poor guy'd say, this is my Grandma and Grandpa, President Benson. They about had a heart attack, But we had so much fun. We went to dances with them, and he and Grandma were so cute and so fun. And then when I was dating my husband, I had been dating another young man right before him. And so he found out that I was dating, and he wanted to check him out. But he did this for all my cousins, not just me.
Really?
He wanted to check out who we were dating. And then we got engaged, and he said, we were talking about getting engaged. And so he said to my mom, well, I've got to check him out. I've got to make sure he's a good guy. So he called his bishop, he called his stake president, he called his mission president in Korea, and wanted to know what kind of a guy he was. And so he came up to me at conference and put his arm around me, and he said, I just want you to know you're getting a great young man. And I've talked to his bishop and his stake president. I said, I know, because my husband called me and said, well, my fiance at the time, he said, my bishop just called me and President Benson just called him. I said, well, I hope you've been good. And he said, well, yeah, I guess.
Yeah, on your best behavior.
Yeah, and then it was so cute at our engagement dinner. We just sat Grandpa next to my fiance and Grandpa leaned over to him and he said, so Paul, what's important to you? And Paul said, well, my family and the church, I guess. And he goes, I guess? And he said, yeah, my family and the church. And Paul said, I was so scared, but he was so nice, but he was pretty direct. And
yeah, Yeah.
But I think all the great good that he did in flooding the earth with the Book of Mormon, I mean, he was the one that really...
Yeah, that was really a key point with him, is that the Book of Mormon needs to be out there.
Exactly. And then his talk on pride and he did so many wonderful things. So.
I know I've referred back to many of his talks many times. Home teaching and the roles of parents and those kind of things, and pride.
Yes.
Those still come up in many lessons throughout the church.
Yes. In fact, he gave a great lesson, a great talk, while we were in Boston, in fact, on motherhood and the importance of motherhood. And he talked to each of the groups during his presidency, like to the fathers of the church, to the mothers of the church, to the young women, to the young men. But the one on motherhood, we were living in Boston, which is a great city and great people there. But a lot of the women have full-time nannies and work full-time. And I had done television news for several years, and in fact, it was when we were in Oregon and I was working at a TV station, and I sent Grandpa an article in the newspaper about that I had started this new talk show. And because I had quit doing the news full-time so that I could stay home with my new little baby. And so I said, I'm doing a talk show just once a week, and sent him the article. And he would always send us all his conference talks before conference. And he wrote back and he said, I'm very proud of you, and that's great. And he said, but remember and never forget, the greatest and most important responsibility and blessing you will have is that of being a wife and a mother. And never forget that. And I really appreciated that counsel, because my husband had years of school ahead of him. And we moved to Boston, and I could have done news, but I had two little babies, so I did a talk show once a week on Fridays when my husband could get home from dental school and watch the little ones. And so Grandpa gave this talk about the importance of motherhood and being home with your children. And there are circumstances that women, they may be widows and have to work, and there are circumstances that happens. But I think a lot of it is a choice of our priorities, and we can be a huge influence in our community, in our states, in our nation, in so many ways, in affecting good works, in promoting good families, good values, good morals, good freedoms that we enjoy, but still put your foremost priorities on your family. So anyway, we had this big, it was the week after Grandpa's talk, and a bunch of the ladies were going crazy about his talk, that he had said the importance of being home with your family. And they invited all these women to this meeting, and I went to the meeting, and they didn't know that he was my
related
grandfather, that he was the prophet. And so they all went around and just kind of criticized his talk and said, oh, he was born in the 1800s, oh, he was not speaking as a prophet because he was at, it was the Relief Society broadcast, oh, yes, he is speaking as a prophet. And so I was one of the last ones, and it came to me, and I said, you know, I don't know if you know, but he's my grandfather, and what he is saying is what we need to hear. And it may be hard, and I know it's, you know, I could be making a lot of money doing the news full time, but I'm choosing to stay home with my children and just once a week do this TV show so that I can be home with them and be an influence on them. And I'd rather have, I mean, anyone can replace me as a newscaster. Anyone can, but no one can replace me as a mother. And so anyway, they all got very quiet, but a lot of them said to me, you know, I do need to reevaluate my priorities in my life, and I said, he's speaking as a prophet, he's not speaking as a man. So
yeah, and that's a really good point, and we need to talk about that because you have really shown, I think, that, like you said, you can balance that. You can be a wife and a mother and still have that as a priority, but still be a huge influence in your community, in your nation. And
it's so important to be.
Yeah, oh, especially these days. There's so many issues that need to be addressed, and you really can be a really key influence in those issues.
And in your children's schools, in your PTAs, I was PTA president like 3 times, and it's amazing the influence you have with people out of the church. And then there's so many good organizations that are pro-family, pro-marriage,
that you can work with, join, and they're non-denominational, they're interfaith related sometimes. Many other faiths, and so there's a lot of your influence as a woman, no matter who you are, can be felt at great lengths. So just to remind our listeners, you're listening to Why Believe on the Mormon channel of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Our guest today is Heather Sandstrom here in Arizona, and the granddaughter of Ezra Taft Benson, great prophet. And we were just talking about some of the influences that women can have, both as a wife and mother in the home and also in the communities, far-reaching communities, including nations. And you've had some interesting experiences where you're involved with the United Families International, and you've gone back to the UN.
Yes.
And held a council for the status of women.
It was the conference on the status of women.
Talk about that. What were your experiences
there? Well, I've been
there?
on the board for United Families International, and it's a very pro-family, pro-marriage. We work a lot with local local people, many denominations that are pro-marriage, pro-family, to defend the sanctity of life, to defend marriage between a man and a woman. They're always helping with the marriage amendments in different states. And they asked me if I would moderate a panel discussion at the United Nations on the conference on the status of women. So there were women from all over the world coming to learn more about women's status in different countries and how we can help women really be more safe and more protected in a lot of these countries that are do horrible things to women.
Yeah.
We're so very blessed to be here in this great country and that value women and the sanctity of women. But anyway, so hosting or moderating this panel discussion, and I brought my little 13-year-old girl with me because it was her 13th birthday that weekend, and she loved it, seeing all the women in the headdresses and the
from all over the world.
All over the world.
Oh,
and
wow.
so I had these ladies on the panel discussion from different Africa, Asia, all over. And they were tremendous. And so the women from all over the world would ask them questions, and I'd kind of moderate the discussion. Mm-hmm. But they said, be prepared, because there will be some plants in there that are anti-marriage, anti-family, anti-women, mm-hmm. and, how they kill and abort these babies in different countries, it's horrible, the different things that I learned about. And how we're trying to protect them. So they said there will be plants in there that will maybe ask you questions. So one of the ladies stood up and she said, well, I know in the scriptures you're talking all about how going to church, all these denominations were saying it's so much better for girls and women to get a good self-esteem if they have good values and good morals and go to church and have a family, that helps build their self-esteem. And she said, in the scriptures, you're talking all about going to church or reading scriptures, and she said in the scriptures it talks all about men and not about women, and just ripping on it, and none of the panel knew what to say. I mean, and she went on and on about how, how the scriptures don't include women and everything, and it was ironic, because I don't think it was ironic, I think it was a blessing, that the week before my little girl and I had read the story of Esther in the Old Testament. And so the panel didn't say anything, and I said, "Oh, that's not true." I said, "There's so many stories of wonderful women in the scriptures." And I said, "The story of Esther, where she stood up for her country and she could have been killed, and for her people, and she saved her people." And the lady just sat down, and all the people were like, "Yay!" Because most of them wanted to promote good morals and values and the importance of marriage and families and really protecting women throughout the world. So that was a neat experience. And I told my daughter, I said, that was not coincidence. I think we were
that you studied
guided and directed to study it. And we even watched a video on it. And
that's great. And that's only one of the stories in the scriptures.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there's so many powerful women that stand up for what's right.
That's great.
But United Families International has been great to really help promote, I think, the definition of marriage. And my husband and I were involved in the big marriage amendment here in Arizona and throughout different states in the nation. And it was so amazing to see all these wonderful families, all different denominations, evangelicals, Baptists, Mormons, Catholics. It's tremendous to work with them and feel of their great power and strength in encouraging great families and good morals. And we really had some tremendous missionary experiences. We had wonderful single adults from all over the state come to our home every week to make signs, to make posters, to make phone calls, and they'd bring their friends that were not of our faith. I worked with these ladies on this big victory party for the marriage amendment that were not of our faith. And it's amazing. It's so important that they see that the Mormons believe that way, and that we stand by what we believe in.
That is incredible. You had mentioned before we started recording today that you were having a victory party for this marriage amendment that passed.
Yes.
And you got a phone call. Talk about that.
Oh, with my brain tumor? Well, like 17 years ago, I had, it's been 18 years now, I had thyroid cancer, and I had a lump on my neck, and my husband noticed I had a lump, and so I went and got it checked. They said it was nothing, and anyway, I ended up having thyroid cancer, and it had spread up the lymph nodes, and they had to take it out and take out the lymph nodes and do radiation, and I had a brand new little baby at the time, 4 little children, and then they said I wouldn't have any more children, or shouldn't have any more. And miraculously, I got the 5th little girl, the 5th daughter. And so I was so blessed. But then, 18 years later, here I was on the computer constantly with all the single adults, organizing this marriage amendment, and I was typing a letter to the editor. And all of a sudden, I felt my face go droopy. So I called my husband at his dental office, and I said, I think I have Bell's palsy. I'm like droopy here. And so he came home immediately. So he rushed me to the hospital, and he said it had gone away. But they went and did an MRI and a CAT scan, and I had just gone the day before and planned this whole victory party for the marriage amendment. And so we went to the hospital. They did the CAT scan and MRI, and they said it's a malignant brain tumor on the right side of my brain. And so I had to call a friend and say, can you take care of the rest of the marriage amendment victory party? And she said I'd be happy to. So they took me into surgery, and all of our children came to the hospital. Our son flew in from law school, and our other children were here. And so we had a family prayer, and then my husband and sons and our stake president gave me a priesthood blessing. And I really think that made the difference, because we had doctors, we had several neurosurgeons that were friends of ours and that were friends of my sister, who her husband was stake president in Phoenix, and they all looked at my MRIs and CAT scans and said it was definitely a malignant tumor. And so they went in and they gave me the blessing, and they came out, and he had told us it's probably not good, and you probably will be on chemo and radiation for 6 months, and that's about how long we expect you to live. So they went in and did the surgery and took a big chunk out of my skull and went deep in the brain and took the tumor out and biopsied it, and it was benign. And they couldn't believe it. All the doctors and nurses kept coming in, and I was talking to them, several nurses, about the church and about they wanted to know about the priesthood blessing, and they said this never happens. They said we do surgeries on people from all over the world that are similar to this, and this never happens. That it's just benign in the place it was and what they thought it was, and from what the CAT scan and MRIs looked like. So I felt that it was truly a miracle. But then I thought at the same time, we've had family members, we've had dear friends that have had tumors or cancer that are wonderful people and plead with the Lord and have wonderful priesthood blessings. But we know it's in the Lord's hands, and He's in control. And I just felt very blessed to be able to get through that. And I was hosting a talk show for United Families International every week called Voice of the Nation. And so I had to stop that because I couldn't, for months it was so painful. But I'm still working with them, and it's a wonderful experience.
Yeah, you're on their board of directors, aren't you?
Yes.
That's wonderful. Well, and it's been how long now? About 2 years?
2 years, yes.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
What a wonderful miracle.
I feel so much better. I felt like a knife was in my head for like months and months.
Oh, well, you look great. You look healthy,
and
it's good to see you. I know I've known you for many years actually, because my family was in the Easter pageant for about 4 years, and you've actually narrated the Easter pageant for many years. 12 years, was it?
12 years, yes.
So,
in fact, we went. I took my children because my oldest daughter really wanted to be a dancer in it. One of the 10 Virgins. They have a beautiful scene, as you know, because you were in it, of the parable of the 10 virgins. And she really wanted to be a dancer. So I took her, because she was a beautiful ballerina, so I took her down for the audition. But I had 4 little children, and my husband was bishop, and I had no intention of being in it. And I filled out the papers, and they said we needed to go to a little devotional at the beginning, so we sat through the devotional. And then Sister Waddell came up, and another director came up and said, we've been praying that someone would come in that would be the right person for the narrator. And we all felt that you were the person. I said, well, I'm not here to audition. I have 5 little children, and my oldest wants to be in it. And they said, well, you could have them in it too. So wow. They've all been in it for many years, and what a tremendous experience, as you know.
Yeah.
We brought so many friends and neighbors and school teachers and business partners, and so many families have joined the church because of the Easter pageant. And I think the greatest experience was for our children to feel of the Great Spirit there and to see the life of Christ portrayed. It's just amazing. Then one day, it was right before Easter, so we were in the middle of Easter pageant every night, and my 2 daughters were upstairs talking, and they were quoting. I thought they were reading this the New Testament, and I said, wow, that's so nice. You're reading the New Testament and all about Christ's life. And they said, oh, no, we're just seeing how much of Easter pageant we have memorized.
It gets that way, doesn't it?
Yeah, you hear it over and over and over.
You're standing backstage just reciting the lines just before they come out over the speakers.
And it's so beautiful to really feel that you're in that life of Christ. And then we had another daughter that was one of the dancers. And also, so we've had a wonderful experience with Easter pageant. But it is amazing when you're involved in these different organizations or in your schools of your children, or like years ago in these, or just everyday life. You can be such a great missionary and share the gospel and share your testimony. And I think people recognize that difference. In fact, years ago, I was in the Miss Teen Canada pageant, and I was just a young girl. I was just 16, and I went to the pageant and met this girl that was the Miss Teen Canada from the year before, and she was there greeting all the girls, and we just kind of hit it off and started talking. And one night at dinner, the little waiter kept coming to our table and saying, you want some coffee? You want some tea? And I kept saying, no, thank you, no, thank you. And she laughed, and she said, why don't you drink coffee or tea? And I said, well, I'm a Mormon, which is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and we have a word of wisdom. We don't drink coffee or tea. We don't smoke or drink. And she said, wow, there's a religion like that? I don't smoke or drink because I think it's stupid, but I didn't know there was a religion like that. She said, will you tell me more about it? So I said, sure. I said, come up to my room. And she said, I noticed, too, you don't swear, and you don't, you just have, like, nice, you talk nicely. Nice, where some of the girls were kind of brash. And so she came up to my room that night, and we talked all about the church. I showed her my Book of Mormon, and we talked about eternal families, how you can get married in the temple, and she just started to cry, and she said, this is what I've been looking for. Here she's 17 and I was 16, and she said, I've always wondered what happened to our families after we died, and I want to be with them forever. And so I said, well, look up in the yellow pages under a church of, she lived in Ottawa, Canada, away on the east coast, and I lived in Calgary, which is on the west side. And so she went home and looked up in the yellow pages and went to a local ward, and I said, look for 2 guys with short hair and little name tags and ask them if you can learn more. And she said, you don't think they'd mind? I'm like, they would love it. Are you kidding? So she started taking the lessons, and her brother started listening, kind of overhearing him. And he ended up joining the church, too. And then one of his best friends ended up joining the church, and they all married, in the temple. And now this friend of mine, years later, she had done sportscasting in Canada, and I had done news. And we had kept in touch just through Christmas cards, but she had never gotten married. And one year my husband saw her Christmas card, and he said, why don't we set her up with this friend of ours from Canada also? And so we set them up, and they ended up getting married, and then they had a little boy, and they were so excited, and the little boy had heart and lung problems, and it was irreversible. And so they did surgery on him to try and help it, but he died of complications after the surgery. And she said to me, because I showed her the quotes, by prophets, that you will be able to raise your children again, and you will be their mother eternally. And she said, I could have never, ever gotten through this experience of having a son die if I didn't have the knowledge of the gospel and the knowledge of eternal families, and that I will be able to raise him again. And then they had 2 little girls after that. So, and they live in our stake now here in Arizona.
Oh, that's wonderful.
It's amazing that people notice the difference. They notice what we stand for, and really just the happiness that we feel.
Oh, that's great. That's great. You're listening to Why I Believe on the Mormon channel of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And today our guest is Heather Sandstrom, who is the granddaughter of President Ezra Taft Benson. And we've been talking about some different things in your life, experiences you've had as a cancer survivor, and being active in many community efforts to support women and families and marriage. I'd love to talk to you a little bit about some of your feelings about living your religion. It seems like you have taken many opportunities in your life to be out there among other people, working to support a cause. And it's not these aren't church-backed, church-sponsored organizations or anything like that, but you are getting out there to support causes that you know are important. And yet, at the same time, you have experiences in your life, living your religion, where you have opportunities to share the gospel in those settings.
It's true.
I'd love to hear about some of your feelings about that.
Well, some of the other organizations, like United Families International, I've helped a lot with, and there's people from all religions. Mm-hmm. And when you go to the United Nations, all countries and all, it's an amazing experience. But people really gravitate when they see people that believe in something and stand up for something, and they're happy that they want that in their lives, and mm-hmm. they gravitate to them, and they ask them, what's different about you? What is it? They can't quite figure it out, but it's so easy to talk about it because most everyone has a family, and most everyone has a connection that even if you're sitting on an airplane mm-hmm. and talking to someone. I remember one day I was sitting on an airplane and I was helping with the National Junior Miss, uh-huh. and I was coming home from that, and there was this man on the airplane that was the scariest looking guy I've ever seen. He had tattoos all over and scary hair, and I thought, I always share my testimony with people or start talking to them about their families and just what we have in common. And people care about their grandchildren or their husband or their wives or their children, and they want to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And you can easily bring in the gospel and how we believe in eternal families, and especially if someone has a family member that's passed away, you can encourage them that you'll see them again, that you'll be with them again. Anyway, so this guy, I'm thinking, I don't want to talk to him. He was so scary looking. But he got up and walked past me to go to the restroom and came back, and I said, so where are you from? And he said, I'm from a northern part of Arizona. And he said, I was reading my scriptures, and I had my journal out, and he said, oh, is that your journal? And I said, yeah, and are those, is that the Bible? And I said, well, it's the Bible and the Book of Mormon. And I started talking to him, and he had worked on oil rigs in Central and South America. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, this, in the Book of Mormon, it talks all about when Christ came again to the Americas, and that's where it was, right where you were. And he said, I went and saw all the ancient ruins and all these temples and the white god that came.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he knew a lot about it. He had gone and seen a lot of history in Central and South America. And so he was very interested. He said, I remember when I was a teenager, I had a friend that was a Mormon, and he would let me ride my motorcycle around the church parking lot. And he said, I remember they were such nice people. And he was so scary. So I kept telling him about the Book of Mormon and about Christ coming to the Americas, and that it was another testament of Jesus Christ. And he just got really interested and wanted to know all about it. And he said, I want to share this with my wife. And I said, well, and it was my little quad, that I had marked all up. It was like my favorite scriptures. And I kept getting this feeling, give it to him. And I kept thinking, no, I'll give him my ensign, and I kept getting the feeling, give it to him. So I said, would you like my scriptures? And he said, you would give that to me? I said, it's just about as precious as my husband and children, but you can have it. My husband just bought me a big one that I haven't used, so you can have it. And he started to cry, and he said, I will read it with my wife. And I thought, you can never judge who may be receptive to the gospel, but he was extremely receptive, and it was amazing.
Oh, that is
so incredible. I don't know if he ever joined the church or anything, but I've learned you always bring the little Book of Mormon with you, the little blue one, so you can share it. You don't have to give him your quad.
So you pack an extra.
Yeah,
when
so
you
I
go
always pack a couple of extra ones. Yeah, but it is amazing in these organizations or in school, like for teenagers, what an influence they can be on their friends. I remember in high school, I had a dear friend that she just wanted to come to our Saturday night dances in Canada with us because there was a lot of wild kids, a lot of drugs and stuff. And she said, you guys seem to have a lot of fun, but you don't do bad things. And I said, yeah, we have a great time. And so she came to our dances, and then she started coming to seminary with us. And her dad was like the head guy of the Anglican Church in Canada, which is a big church, and that's who he worked for. And I think he was over the finances of the Anglican Church, so they didn't want her to join at all. And they said, you can go with them. She came to church with us on Sundays, but you cannot take the lessons. You cannot get baptized till you're 18. So she was very faithful. She came with us all through high school. And so when she was 18, she started dating this friend of mine that was a returned missionary, and she ended up going to BYU with me. And he would come over to their home and basically teach her parents the discussions, just talking. And so she ended up joining the church, and her parents ended up joining the church. But her dad had to quit his job because he worked for the Anglican Church in Canada. So he quit his job, and they started a beautiful flower store, and he did the business and she did the flower arranging. And her brother joined the church, and she got married in the temple. And
wow.
An amazing thing that she just noticed. So people in high school can be a huge influence. And like all these organizations, there's so many. I think that's the key, is women can be such a powerful influence for good. And you can just find any of these good organizations. Like I was with American Mothers for years because I had 5 little children. I heard about it through some friends, and I thought, what a great organization to promote the moral and spiritual foundation of the home and family. And there's women from all over the nation that are not of our faith, that are not LDS. There's a lot that are LDS. In fact, they always say, how come they always pick the LDS ones to be the Mother of the Year? Because they're such good moms. And we're fortunate that we have family home evenings. We have, good guidance from the scriptures, from our prophets to teach us how to be good parents. But these women are like, it seems like all these Mormon ladies always get picked to be the Mother of the Year. But there are a lot of women that aren't, too, that aren't LDS. But I thought to rub shoulders with those ladies and for them to find out that we are normal, that we are Christian, that we have good values, that we love our families and children is so important, whether they join the church or not. And a lot do. But even if they don't, it's great that they can
and you're
feel
still,
that.
and like you said, you're still planting a seed.
Right.
You're still influencing for good, and sometime down the road, they may look back on that and say, like the guy on the airplane said, I had a friend back in this organization,
That's right.
and it may be you that planted that seed.
And they say
sometimes
sometimes it takes, 8 times or something like that?
To be introduced to something.
To be introduced to the gospel, and then finally people go, oh, that's what I want.
Yeah. And it may just be that the first time it doesn't click, or there's the issue in their life isn't being addressed that they need to have addressed by the gospel. But eventually, an issue will come up that the gospel always can address something in somebody's life.
Oh, yes.
That always is a solution to issues,
And everybody has trials and problems right now, and the gospel just brings so much hope and joy and really a knowledge of the Savior, that He lives and loves you.
Yeah.
And that our Heavenly Father loves you, and that He really cares about you and wants you to be happy. I mean, we know that we're going to have trials, but yet we can still find joy through the journey.
Yeah. Well, Heather, what are you involved in now? What are you doing now? Since you've recovered from your last bout with cancer, what keeps you busy?
Well, I
these
was
days?
just called as Stake Relief Society president, so I'm busy organizing all that, a lot of humanitarian, because I feel very strongly about humanitarian. We were very involved in, right after Hurricane Katrina, I was president of this Republican women's group, and I've been involved with that for years. And so anyway, I was just speaking. I was introducing the guest speaker, and it was right after Hurricane Katrina. And I said, one of the ladies that was speaking stood up, and she said, she was a emergency nurse, and she said, I have a doctor that wants to take his plane, a private plane, and take it to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. But we need to fill it with doctors and nurses. And I think there's 9 seats on the plane. And she said, but I don't know how to find doctors and nurses that will go down there. And so I said, well, let me see what I can do. So after the meeting, I went home and I talked to our stake president, who was a hospital administrator. And he put out an email throughout his hospital. And within an hour, he had ICU nurses and doctors volunteer to go on this plane. So I called her and said, we got them. We got the doctors and nurses. She was so excited. She said, I found out we can take 500 pounds of medical supplies with us. And she said, can you get them? And I thought, well, my husband has some antibiotics at his dental office, but not, 500 pounds of medical supplies. So, and it was on, I believe, a Labor Day weekend, and several years ago. So I called our stake president and some neighboring stake presidents that were friends of ours. And they put out the word, don't go to the store. I mean, this was like Sunday morning. Mm-hmm. We need 500 pounds of medical supplies. And so the 3 stakes in our area put out the word, and they brought doctors brought stuff. They brought diapers. They brought everything you can imagine, hygiene kits, everything. And no one went to the store. It was a Sunday. And they said, just bring what you have. And I'm not kidding. Our house was full to the ceiling of everything. And I thought, my husband walked in, he was bishop of a singles ward, and he had no idea that I was doing all this. And he came home and he said, what are we, we're not the church storehouse, we're not the bishop's storehouse. He said, what are we going to do with all this? This is like 5,000 pounds, not 500 pounds. And so he said, so I said, we'll figure it out. And so we went through all of the stuff, sorted everything out, and all the medical supplies, antibiotics, shots, everything you can imagine. And we weighed it, and it was just over 500 pounds, just the medical supplies. But then we had, almost 5,000 pounds of extra stuff. And this one man in another stake heard that we were collecting things, and he said this trucking company had just donated a big truck to take down to Louisiana. And I said, oh, you are a lifesaver. You are an answer to our prayers. Come by. And we loaded it all up. And he took it right down to the Bishop Storehouse in Slidell, Louisiana. And I thought, that was a miracle. It literally happened in the middle of the night. I got this feeling, we've got to call these stake presidents. And they announced it in their wards. And it was a miracle. So that's what we're trying to do for our stake in the Stake Relief Society, is do a lot of humanitarian. With the economy the way it is, there's so many needs.
Yeah, and like you said, the economy is here.
Right.
And there's a big push to really take care of those locally, to work locally.
And like President Eyring's talk on this service day that we're all supposed to do, we're planning a huge service day. Then we have a lot of Hispanic in this area in Arizona, and they have lots of local churches here that are falling apart, that are not big denominations. So every ward is going to go and rebuild their churches. And they're not members of our faith, but I think what a great service to do that. And then we're providing tons of clothes and shoes and hygiene kits to the homeless. So that's what I'm just recently, it's only been like 2 months that I've been called, so we're pushing really hard to do a lot of humanitarian.
You jumped right in, hit the ground running.
But I'm still on a lot of these boards and serving with them as well. So.
The amazing thing to me is that anybody anywhere could get involved in a cause like this almost immediately. Like you said, it happened overnight, and you can call your own Stake Relief Society president, or through your own Ward Relief Society president, you can jump in and immediately either join a cause like this or create a cause. Or just
a
support for a cause.
And there's so many good organizations, but really the church is so well organized. And if we donate to the church or help with their humanitarian, whatever they need for humanitarian, it's amazing what good you can do. Or like one lady I know that is such a sweet lady, her little baby died of sudden infant death syndrome. And she said when she came home from the hospital, how difficult it was to not have anything, And so she makes these little boxes up for parents that lose their children, and put a blanket and a little stuffed animal, and I think they take prints of their, handprints of their, to give to the. So there's lots of things that you can do, you can think of, or organizations that you can get involved with. But like your stake humanitarian leader, boy, they know what the needs are. Stake Relief Society president or Ward Relief Society president. It's so important to get. If you have any free time at all to help out, or the elderly, they always love people to come in and visit them. That means the world to the elderly. There's so many little things that you can do that don't have to be big, huge. We're going to have Hurricane Irene. I know there will be massive needs with that in the next few days, next few weeks.
Right. I think President Monson's really set a great example there about, like you just mentioned, just visiting a widow. Some people will feel, I can't do that much, or I can't, I don't have that much time or that much resources to contribute. But like you said, it does mean so much.
Oh,
just
it means the world
to a widow, to have somebody come and visit them. whether it be a young woman or a Relief Society sister.
Exactly.
It's
well, we
important.
had a lady in our former ward that we were in that I was asked to visit teach. And, I mean, just doing your visiting teaching can make a big difference. She hadn't been active for years and years, and she was married to a man that wasn't a member of the church. And her boys would go to church with their friends, but she didn't go for years. And just going and visiting, teaching her every month, and just being her friend, she started to come, and she had severe Parkinson's disease, and it got worse and worse, and she had to have brain surgery that they put in these probes in her brain to help with the tremors, and she's just had horrible, horrible experiences through this Parkinson's, but they've tried to help her in some small ways. But it was years and years. It was like 8 years of visiting, teaching her. And finally, we talked about, why don't you go to the temple, even though her husband's not a member. He's supportive. All her boys, she's had 5 boys. They've all gone on missions. She's raised wonderful children. And she said, I said, why don't you think about going to the temple? And she finally did. And it was so hard for her because she shook so bad with her Parkinson's. But she went to the temple, and I went with her to the temple prep classes. And it totally changed her life, and she will not probably live that long, but she enjoys the blessings of the temple.
The gospel and the temple.
Yes, and her husband still hasn't joined, but he may someday. He's supported these great young men, his sons going on missions, and so
all
miracles
that posterity.
happen.
He'll have grandchildren
That's
coming
right.
back to him,
You bet.
teaching him the gospel.
He will too. So it's amazing
That's
the little
great.
things we can do make a huge difference.
Yeah, that's a great point. You are listening to Why I Believe of the Mormon channel of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And our guest today is Heather Sandstrom, who is a resident here in Mesa, Arizona. And thank you so much, Heather, for sharing all of the stories of your life. It's been so interesting to hear about your experiences as a granddaughter of President Benson, and to hear about the real life side of him. So many members would see him as only see him as the prophet speaking from the pulpit. But it's great to hear the other stories about how he, protected you and
he
checked
was
up
so
on your
cute.
dates.
Well,
and
I
that kind of
remember
thing.
too going to conferences with, we'd always go to general conference and get to sit kind of near the front in the old tabernacle with the hard benches, and I remember one time Grandma, and they always did this, she'd always lean over and say, pray for Grandpa, and it would go down the row, pray for Grandpa before he gave his talk. But he was always so sweet. I remember we'd all get together after conference and be in their home, and we'd sit around and he'd talk to all the grandchildren and say, try and live right and try and be good, because it's so worth it in the long run. And it doesn't matter who your grandpa is, it doesn't matter who your mom and dad are, it's what's important is your testimony and your faithfulness. And that really made an impact on me as a young girl. And then as I had 5 children, that they could be around him. And our youngest was just a few months old when he passed away. But my older children remember being in his home and having him talk to them and saying, just hang in there, do what's right, obey the commandments, live morally clean. It brings you so much joy and happiness.
Wow, what a great influence.
Yes. Yes. Oh, tremendous.
Well, Heather, we just have a few minutes left here on Why I Believe, and we always like to close hearing some of your thoughts about the gospel and the role it's played in your life. Would you share that with us as we close our program today?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Okay.
I think I always had a spark of testimony inside, maybe because my parents were so awesome. My dad was such a kind, sweet, gentle man. He was a great heart surgeon. And in fact, he pioneered the bypass operation years ago. And my mom had such a fervent testimony and such a great missionary. And I think she got that from her parents, too, that they were just, amazing. I had wonderful grandparents on both sides. In fact, I want to share with you one experience that several years ago, my father, here he was this great heart surgeon, and he was dying of congestive heart failure, which was ironic. And I said, can't you get a bypass? You invented them. He goes, I don't need a new bypass. I need a new ticker. I need a new heart. And he said, but I'm too weak. I'll probably die on the operating table. if I did. And so we went and visited him in the hospital in Canada. We'd all go up there when he'd get bad and come back and go up. And we were in his hospital room, and one lady came up to me, and she said, "You don't know me." And she said, "Your dad operated on my husband 20 years ago and did a triple bypass on him." And she said, "I remember he was so scared, my husband, about the surgery that he thought he was going to die. And your dad came in to check on him the night before and held his hand and said, 'You'll be fine. I've done thousands of these before.' And he said, I know I'm going to die." And she said, "Your dad laid down on the hospital floor and slept there all night long, holding his hand." And she said, not only was he such an amazing surgeon, but what a kind, gentle, thoughtful, and man he was. And whatever we do in our lives, that's what I think of, like my Grandpa Benson and my grandma. People would always rush up to see Grandpa. But I thought, if you only knew the firecracker that's next to him, she is the reason why he is such a great man. And she could see that he was this poor, humble farmer, but he was a diamond in the rough. And she said, he is such a good man and has such a strong testimony, even though she was very wealthy and he was, came from a very humble family, that she could see that his goodness and his testimony, that was much more important to him. So I just am so grateful that I had that knowledge as a young girl. And when I got baptized, I remember feeling the feeling of the Holy Ghost just warming my heart. And I remember my oldest daughter had the same feeling when she got baptized. She just kept crying, and she said, "Why am I crying?" And I said, that's the Spirit touching you. That's the Holy Ghost. And I'm just so grateful for the knowledge that I have that our Savior lives and loves us. I think he gave us the perfect model after which we're to pattern our lives. And he said that greater love hath no man than this, than a man lay down his life for his friends. And I think not only did he lay down for us the perfect example of earthly living, but for our sake he willingly gave us his life. I'm grateful for his great example and his atonement, and testify that we have a prophet on the earth today, President Monson, and that if we follow his counsel and his advice, that we will be much happier and the Lord will bless us. Doesn't mean we won't have trials or heartaches, but it will help us so much and give us joy and happiness. I'm grateful for my wonderful husband and how I've watched him serve so faithfully as bishop for 3 different wards, and the joy and happiness, and to have young children while you're raising your young children and your husband being bishop for that many years, and just how they've pitched in and helped and seen him serve so faithfully, and they want to serve like that in turn. I think parents can be powerful examples to their children as they serve others. And I mean, he'd take this little electric car around the neighborhood and just have feelings to stop at someone's home. And several times people would say, "I've been praying that you would come." He's like, "Well, you could call me, But I really think the Holy Ghost guides you and directs you and prompts you to help others. And I'm grateful to be a mother and to be a grandmother now. And it's so much fun. And they always say that being a grandmother is even better than being a mother. I couldn't ever imagine that, but it is awesome. But to see your children make correct choices and get married in the temple. I've got 3 married in the temple and 2 teenagers still, 1 son on a mission and 1 at home. And I think what a blessing it is that they want to do what's right, that they want to say their prayers and read their scriptures, that they seek for good friends and good spouses. That is the best, when they marry someone that you just dearly love. And you may not even know them, but boy, what a great blessing to have children marry wonderful spouses. But I think to see, they always say you can tell if you're a good parent by how your grandchildren turn out, because if your children are teaching them correct principles, your grandchildren will make choices. So that'll be the test to see. Hopefully they'll all, and I think they will. They're awesome.
Something tells me you'll still teach your grandchildren as well.
That's right, for sure. But I'm so thankful, so grateful for the Book of Mormon. I testify it is true. I'm just so grateful for families, for the plan of salvation, that we know that we will be with our families again. And I think as we share the gospel with others and people see our testimonies, and we can be huge influences in our communities, in our nation, in the world, and most importantly in our homes, is to teach that just the love of the gospel, the love of our Savior, of His, and then if people mess up, if they do things that are wrong, that they can be forgiven, that they can, hopefully they make good choices, that they don't have to go through that heartache and anguish. But if they do, that they have a wonderful bishop. That we've had years and years and years of single adults coming through our home every single night for hours and hours and hours, and to visit with them and to see the difference when you can see the heartache and the discouragement on their faces, and after sometimes months of working with the bishop, it's like a huge load has been lifted off their shoulder, and they're so happy and so relieved and so clean. And I think it is amazing. The atonement takes care of all of that. So, so grateful for that. And I testify that these things are true.
Oh, thank you. Heather, thanks so much for sharing your feelings about the gospel and your stories, your life stories.
You bet.
You've been a great influence and a great example. And
thank you.
So appreciate you being here with us on Why I Believe today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks. You've been listening to Why I Believe on the Mormon channel of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. For more information on this program and other programs on the Mormon channel, please go to mormonchannel.org. You can also listen to new episodes of this program every Tuesday at 1 o'clock, and we invite you to join us there or to download the program at your convenience. Thanks for listening, and have a great day.